Welcome in, everybody, to the latest edition of the Red State Rundown. My name is Misty Morgan. Brandon Shoup, we are your host of the podcast. As promised, we take issues that are affecting the state of Alabama and we find experts and bring it down a little bit local and have these smart, intelligent people, handsome too, explain to us exactly what's going on in lamest terms, because we're like that, right, Brandon?
That's right. And the handsome gentleman we have with us today are the superintendents of Houston County Schools and Dothan City Schools, Brandy White and Dennis Coe. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here.
Did you know you're handsome experts? Did you know that?
We didn't know either.
I've been called. We've been called a lot. So
I bet you have.
So one thing Brandon and I are going to do is do a education series, because there's a couple of things that are important that are impacting the education system around. One, we want to find out today specifically. The report card came out. You guys get report cards too. It's not just the kids.
That's correct. That's correct.
So let's start by what have we found out by the report card? How are we looking?
Well, we were in 87 last year, and we stayed at an 87 this year.
Now, you're talking about Houston County
Houston
schools.
County. This is Houston County. And we were a little disappointed in that because we went up across the board in our proficiency levels in math and reading, and we went up on the ACT, but our attendance and our grad rate were down a little bit. So that brought us back down to even. We would have been about 3 or 4 points higher if it had not been for attendance and grad rate. So a little disappointed in that, but still happy with our results. And when you look at the things that really matter, when you look at their actual scores, we were up. So we were proud of our teachers and proud of our students for that.
Ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
Dr. Coe, where are you guys at?
So we last year we were a 76 as a district, and this year we've moved up to an 80. So we moved up a letter grade as a district. I do feel good in the fact that this is the first time that the district has moved back to a B since the magnet schools were disbanded. So I think that for me, what that tells me, and I think that what that should tell everybody else, is academically we're able to accomplish the same things that we did back when we had magnets. So we still have room to improve. We still struggle with same things Brandy struggles with, particularly with our chronic absenteeism and the challenges that we have in secondary schools. But we had, out of our 19 schools, we had 17 schools, 15 schools that get a report card. 10 of those actually moved up a letter grade.
Ooh.
And so we're extremely proud of that and the work that we're doing. And we experience the same things. I mean, when you look at the children we teach, they're not, and the children that they teach in the counties, they're a reflection of society. So we oftentimes we experience the same things, in the classroom, the same challenges. And but we're proud of the report card. We've got a lot of great things going on. We've shown some great improvement, and we're just thankful for the results we got.
Yes.
So you both talked about chronic absenteeism. What is the reason behind that, or what do you think is going on there?
It's a national trend. It's not something that's unique to Dothan City or Houston County. I mean, that's something that we see across the state and across the country. That's something they're still researching that as after COVID hit and we went to some form of virtual setting. People got used to not going to school. People got used to doing things at home and got relaxed. And so the challenges now that we see with parents, we're trying to retrain parents and regain that train of thought that kids need to be in school every day. And so someone who's chronically absent is somebody that's missed 18 days of school or more.
That's a lot of school.
That's a lot of school to miss. So you're talking a month of school to miss. And so that's a problem. Again, that's something that we're seeing across the country as a result of what transpired during those COVID years.
Is there a lack of importance being placed on education from the parents to the child? Do we as a society just don't value education as much as we used to? You live in this world.
Well, I wouldn't say they don't value it as much. I think, this will be a topic we'll get to, I'm sure, a little bit later when we start talking about ACT, but the majority of our children aren't going to college. And so I wouldn't say that we don't value education as much. I don't think we're valuing a college education as much because that type of education has really priced itself out of existence.
It has. And I saw a survey, and I don't have the numbers, and I read this survey just last night. It was talking about that they did a survey, how valuable do you think a college education is? And those numbers went down dramatically. I think before, the majority of American citizens placed a tremendous amount of value on a college education. Now it's not a majority anymore. And I can't remember. I was having this conversation with somebody today, actually, and I've had this conversation with several people. I said, if I could give young people one bit of advice, it would be to learn a trade while you're in high school. Go to college, but work while you go through college. Perfect your trade, work for another company until you're about 30 years old. And it could be plumbing, electrical, construction. And when you're 30, quit, start your own business. 5 years, you'll be a millionaire if you got your head screwed on straight.
That's a good business plan.
Yeah,
that's the perfect business plan.
But when I was in high school, nobody was telling us that,
Well, we've been looking at trying to change the accountability model in Alabama. And when you've got 68% of your kids that won't go to a 4-year school, yet you're giving the ACT as your measure of accountability in high school, it's difficult. And it's a norm reference test. It's not criteria. It's not the actual content standards that we're teaching in high school, but that if you have a 9 through 12 school, that is your only measure of accountability for proficiency and for growth. And so that is difficult. And so when you start looking at those scores and you look at, especially in grades 3 through 8, you're able to look at the ACAP. And those are on the standards that those teachers taught. But when you look at 9 through 12, it is only the ACT.
Who makes up these rules like that?
Well, I will say that, the state is looking at the possibility of changing that. We actually presented last week to talk about, what some other options might be and how that could be better. And I think they're going to be receptive to that.
Especially since the shift has gone into trades. Like we're picking that back up saying, whoa, we basically would put people down for going into the trades. And now we're realizing we massively need those.
Well, and we don't want to do away with the ACT.
Right.
We still want to offer the ACT to the students that plan on going to college, but we don't want to force those students to take the ACT. I think that's a waste of taxpayer money. And we're really pushing career tech and we're starting new programs in career tech. And so, again, by the 11th grade, we want those students to be able to choose the track. Do you want to co-op? Do you want to choose, a career tech option? Are you going to do dual enrollment, AP courses? And so we want to be able to offer them something regardless of the direction that they plan.
And a lot of the states that supposedly have better education systems than Alabama don't force every high schooler to take the ACT, correct?
That's correct. And we started looking at it. When you look at some of the top states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, they were at a 25, 26 on the ACT. But when you start looking at the percentage of students that take the ACT, it was anywhere from 5 to 8%. We have 100% of our students taking the ACT.
Yes.
And Alabama is an 18 composite. Okay, so we took our top 10%, and we're both at a 25, 26 with our top 10%. So those are their top students that are taking that test. So Alabama is very comparable to some of the top states when you start looking at apples to apples.
Apples to apples. Look at us. See, let's stay on the trades and let's just applaud and just shout praises for our trade program that you guys have. And let's talk a little bit about that and the programs that are really doing well and what you have coming. You just said you have more. What's next?
Well, we're actually wanting to start cosmetology, and I'll tell you a little funny. The first year that I was superintendent, I get a call from Dr. Mackey during fall break, and he says, Brandy, I need you to do me a favor. He said, I would like for you to be the chair for the course of study standards. And he just said for career tech. He didn't tell me exactly what. And so naturally, I'm a new superintendent, so you don't tell the state superintendent no. So I agreed to do it. Then I find out later I was chairing the course of study standards for cosmetology. and so you're looking at the chair for the cosmetology standards for the state.
Nice.
So we are starting a cosmetology department probably next year. We're looking at the possibility of that. But we started building construction. We also started ROTC for the schools that were too small to have it on their campus. Rehoboth was the only school that was large enough to have its own program. But the other 4 schools that are smaller, they can now go to the Career Academy and take advantage of ROTC. So we're proud of that.
Yes, you should be. And that building is amazing. And I just went in there for the National Peanut Festival Parade, and you really are in awe when you walk in there and think, man, these kids are learning good stuff in this building. It's beautiful and the teachers are phenomenal. The whole thing is just, thank you for really putting a lot of effort and thought into that. And
the general construction, we've been super proud of that. Ken Woodham, there was a builder, and he's doing that program. And it is amazing when you walk in there and see what those students are able to do.
Mm-hmm. We just completed an $8 million renovation of Dothan Tech. So it had never been renovated since the old Northview High School was constructed. So we've invested and basically gutted that entire building, built that back, and updated all of our equipment. We currently offer 17 programs at Dothan Tech. And so we have, and Brandy and I have talked about sharing resources. The problem we have, and we've had people that have asked, why do we have 2 facilities? And it's logistics for us and scheduling. So when you're bringing in, as Houston County, bringing in people from Wicksburg and Columbia and Cottonwood, into one site, then you've got to coordinate scheduling there. So for us to be able to do that, it makes it more difficult scheduling wise when we're having to pull. So that's been difficult for us to partner on those, but we have actually reached out to Henry County and are now partnering with Headland High School. We have children from Headland High School that are coming to Dothan Tech taking aviation classes. We have, we're about to start an HVAC class sponsored by Train.
There's good money in that.
Oh, yeah. Health South is a major contributor for us. They sponsor our medical health science curriculum, and so they do a really good job of partnering with us. We have culinary arts. We have cosmetology. And, we started a few years ago. Of course, we all are proud when we have kids that are athletes that have signing day. We actually started having signing day for our Career Tech kids that are taking an employment contract. Yes. So to me and to our people that are staffed out there, it's just as important. Matter of fact, our valedictorian last year graduated from Dothan High School the day after he got his associate's degree from Wallace College. So going through dual enrollment, he actually got a 2-year degree the day before his high school diploma. And he congratulated the rest of his classmates and basically said, I wish you all the best of luck in your college endeavors. I'm going to work. And we, I applaud that because this country is built on and is sustained by people who are plumbers and electricians. And we're able to offer those training and those skills in our programs, both of our programs that are really going to sustain our country. And so we do need more help. We do, when we talk about funding 17 programs, we get about $40,000 a year from the state to sustain 17 programs. So, it's not that we're, constantly, we are funded, most of our funding is earmarked. And so the vast majority of our budgets, we're dictated to by the state how we can spend it. And so we really need additional funds, and we have to really heavily rely on partnerships like Health South and those other construction companies and other Train and other HVAC companies partnering with us to be able to provide the extra things we need to make sure we can train them in a manner where they're ready to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we looked at it. Wasn't it 6 to 8% of our budget is actually discretionary?
Yes.
And so most of your budget, it's already mandated as here's where it's going to be spent. And so that's difficult. I think we looked this year, 82% of our budget was just salaries. And so it makes it hard when you start looking at facilities, technology, curriculum, programs. When you look at all those things, you have very little left when 82% goes to salaries.
How does something like Train come about? That's intriguing. I mean, that's a national company. Are they doing that across the state? Is that a thing?
When COVID hit, we were fortunate. We've received over when COVID, when all of that started, everybody received COVID funds. Dothan City Schools over the last few years have received a total of about $60 million in funding. And so when I came in and started looking at everything in our district, one of the big things that we were woefully lagging on was deferred maintenance. So we had really over $30 million worth of work that needed to be done just in air conditioning systems. We had air conditioning units 55 years old, never been replaced. And so we took on a massive replacement upgrade with some of these federal funds because of air quality. We were able to put in systems that have bipolar ionization and an extreme filtering system to purify the air better in the classrooms. And so as a result of that, we ended up spending roughly a third of that $60 million just on HVAC upgrades. So as part of that partnership that we had with Train, they have agreed to ante up and continue the partnership. And they're like us. I mean, they're like anybody right now, any entity, every business that I know right now is looking for workers. Mm-hmm. And so they're no different. So they see the value in education. They see the opportunity, and this is a way for them to grow their next generation of technicians.
That's a perfect lead in too, because that's what it's all about. That's why Brandon and I wanted to focus on education for just a minute, because it's not just them as, the students, that becomes the workforce, that becomes the civilization. That's humanity moving on. And we want to make sure that we're moving on in a proper direction. So that's why it is important to stay plugged into education and what's going on with local students. So now we know that a lot of them are getting that good career tech education, and some of them will continue to go off to the 4-year colleges, but we just wanted to know exactly what is going on and what you guys are doing. And it looks really good from your point, from the report card. How is Alabama then compared to other states? Do you know that? Do they show you that too?
Well, this is our state report card. This would not match other states. They have different accountability models depending on the state. The NAEP is the one thing that would be consistent across the nation. Mm-hmm. However, it's a random test. So it's not given everywhere. So everyone doesn't take it. You might have one school in your system and one grade level that takes it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really hard to look at that and look at your system and determine where you are. Mm-hmm. So that's hard. But when you look at how Alabama compares on the NAEP, mm-hmm. it's at the lower end. But then when you look at the students that are going to college and how they compare on the ACT, we're very comparable. And so I think it's important to look at, how does the NAEP scores by state compare to the students that are going to college scores on the ACT? Right. Because if it doesn't correlate with secondary, then is it really relevant? Right.
Well, I just wonder, I know through COVID, a lot different education systems did different things. A lot of them shut down a lot longer than what we did. And so that is going to impact their students and therefore impact their workforce even more. And just a lot of things are going to happen out of that. But I think we did a good job.
I think this whole area did a good job. Yes. And we talked to the other superintendents. We were in constant contact. And I think the one thing that was consistent in the entire Wiregrass area with every superintendent is we wanted to get back to normal as soon as possible. And so we did everything we could to keep the doors open. You had superintendents covering classes. You had central office covering classes. There were times where we had to shut down secondary and they had to do virtual part of the day so that those teachers could cover elementary classes. And again, the reason for that was so that the community could keep going, because you had healthcare workers and those type of things that might have elementary students. The secondary students could do some form of virtual. And so, again, we tried to be as creative as possible just to keep the doors open. And I think that's really what helped this area. Mm-hmm.
So one of the topics I wanted to discuss, because I know it's affected both of you, not so much recently, is the out-of-district students. I know Houston County did a program, I guess, a few years ago where someone from outside the district could come into the county school systems. They would pay a little bit of a tuition, I guess. Y'all are no longer doing that because schools are full. Talk about the reasons behind the decision to do it, the reasons behind the decision to stop doing it, and how that's sort of worked out?
Well, at that time, we'd actually lost students. And so we thought, if you could charge a tuition, and there's some students that, are out of zone that want to attend our school, it's a chance for some of those students to have an opportunity to go to the school that they desire. And also, you made a little bit of money off of it, not much. But as soon as we started it seemed like that was the housing boom, and it started in certain areas. And so we didn't do that very long, because we have to provide for the students that are living within our district. And so the last 3 years, we've gained about 600 students. And so, again, we only had about 40 students that were paying tuition. So the majority of our growth has been students actually moving into that area.
Gotcha.
And so it's been difficult.
That's a lot of growth.
That is a lot of growth.
But that ties back into this area did so well surviving through COVID, and now we are looking very good, I think, to a lot of people across the country, and a lot of people are coming here and obviously bringing their children. Yes,
and one of the difficult things with that is the funding, because like last year we gained 247 students. Well, the way they determine ADM is the 20 days after Labor Day, they look at your average daily membership, and that's how they determine your budget for the following year with the foundation program. And so with that 247 students, we have to fund those teacher units for 1 year before we ever get any funding. So you're looking at about 16 to 17 teacher units that have to be locally funded. And so I do think they need to come up with some kind of adjustment. I know they did that for 1 year, but I think there needs to be an adjustment for schools that have a lot of growth, because you go a year with no funding for those students.
And you'll hear a lot coming up, and already have in the next session, legislative session. If it doesn't pass here, it'll come back. But a lot of your talk will be about school choice. Neither of us are opposed to school choice, but hearing that's one component, what Brandy just mentioned, that's one component of the way our schools are funded that would create a negative impact on school choice. So in our mind, if we had a say in it, we would fix the funding model first. So just to give you an example, how things work, a school choice model, you take, for example, Hoover in Birmingham. Well, they pulled out of Jefferson County because parents chose to pay more taxes. They felt like they could do more. They wanted to voluntarily pay more taxes to have a better school system. So they pay about 40 mills of property tax.
That's a lot. And what is our millage by comparison?
10. We're at the minimum.
The county and the city is 10.
So we're at the bare minimum. But you take, just say, for example, Hoover that's paying 40, and we implement a school choice plan statewide. So those people who move to Hoover that voluntarily wants to pay more to have a better school system, then under a school choice plan would have a kid from, say, Bessemer who's paying 10 mills, but you're going to let him come to Hoover where the residents there have imposed an additional tax on themselves. So that's, there's some unfairness there. How do you manage that discrepancy? How do you call that fair for the people who are voluntarily paying more and somebody moves in but their place of residence doesn't require that much tax? So that's a flaw with just saying school choice is fine. It sounds good. It's a good selling point. It's a good campaign promise, but we've got to fix the funding model first. And then I would suggest to anybody, any legislator or anybody first, we've got to fix the way schools are funded first before you can open up any type of school choice model.
It's interesting you talk about school choice, because our next episode is going to be specifically on school choice. We're going to have Terry Latham on. Hopefully Senator Chasteen will be able to join us as well. And Terry is one of those people that's pushing school choice. So looking forward to getting her input and her perspective. So I know this last cycle, there was the Price Act. I think that was the big push. Under the Price Act, what would have happened in that scenario that you just described?
Well, I think if I remember it correctly, and I'd have to brush it back up on, I think they just established just a basic amount, what the state allocation would be. So, for example, if I were in Hoover and they determined that value per child at just say $8,000, then I'm going to receive $8,000 for that child. But our value may be more, in that district, it may be more, but all you're going to get is the state value. So I think if I read that correctly, that's the way that would fund. So the local district would still be left with a shortfall depending on what that dollar amount was and what the value of their taxes were. So you take a poor rural area, $8,000 may be more than they're getting, but for a more affluent, it may be less. So again, there's some things that need to be cleaned up there to make sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody. And regarding to us, as far as tuition for Dothan City, we don't do that because several years ago we were involved in a lawsuit with Dale County. Dale County filed a lawsuit against, I believe initially it was against Enterprise, over student enrollment for children that were living in Dale County and attending Enterprise City. And throughout that lawsuit, we got involved because a portion of Dothan City extends into Dale County. So as a result of that lawsuit, our settlement agreement basically states that we won't accept any students outside of the city limits of Dothan unless they are a child of an employee. So that's a result of a past lawsuit, a settlement in a lawsuit case, and that's why we don't do what the county does.
Which we've actually had a few students that, they have been going to Dothan. They might have moved to the county or something like that. And we would sign a release for those students. And so we've worked together on that. If a student wanted to go to Dothan, we've allowed it.
So I think one of the reasons that people want choices, right? I want choices. Everybody wants choices, and no one, and I can certainly see why if you lived in an area where your child was forced to go to a poor or an unsafe school, poor in terms of the quality of the education, you would want the ability to put them somewhere else. But I think a lot of the causes, am I wrong to think that a lot of the causes behind some of the just bull crap that we have in our schools is from federal mandates?
The vast majority of that is.
So how much money do they give? Because I know in the state of Tennessee, they've actually, and I don't know if they've made a decision, but they've looked at, of saying, we're just not going to take federal money in our schools, so that way we don't have to put up with the strings that come attached.
That would be roughly 17% of our budget.
17%.
And probably more for you.
We're close to 20.
So that's not an option.
It wouldn't be an option for us because we are very low on, from a local standpoint. Yeah. When we started looking at our funding, and they do a snapshot every year. And so when we're compared to other county systems, when you look back, they're coming up with it this year, but look back 2 years ago, out of 67 county systems, we were 67 in per pupil revenue. We were the lowest county system in the state. And then the next year we were 59. And in those 2 years, we ranked 1 and 2 among county systems in math proficiency, and number 9 and number 7 in reading proficiency. And so it feels good to me that we're overperforming for our funding. Funding doesn't mean everything. The people mean more, but it does make it difficult. Makes it very difficult when you're the lowest and you're trying to compete everywhere. But
Dothan City is the same way. Out of 71 city school systems in the state, when you figure in our local revenues, Dothan ranks last in the state. So I think, hearing that and looking at the scores we have, I think we're doing a good job with the revenues that we currently have. But you mentioned the federal guidelines. I would be extremely behind.
What are some of those guidelines that you would like to just get rid of if you had the power to do that? Like, what are those things that's holding you back?
Well, there's
they're all rushing to his head right now.
I'm telling you, we could make a list. I don't know how much time do we have here. But oftentimes we get public schools in general get painted with the lens of California, New York. We hear it all the time. I heard it yesterday. Somebody stopped me. When are we going to go back teaching cursive writing in schools? Because we hear it in the news. We hear it, all these other platforms. We never stopped. We still do that. So, our people need to understand schools in Alabama aren't run by people in California. We still have the ability to pull out things that are in the curriculum that may be contradictory to what we believe here. But I certainly think that, and would in a dream world, there would be a statewide campaign to raise revenues to a point where we could say, Feds, keep your money. We're going to do this the Alabama way. Keep your money. We're going to ante up locally. We're going to cover this locally. You keep your money and let us run our schools. That would be an excellent.
I love the
setting.
smile on his face. That really makes him happy.
I'll say this too. Rick Ream, when he came into office, I think he had a certain perception of what schools were going to be like because of what he heard on the news. And I'll give him credit. He didn't take that, for face value. He went into some of the schools. He went into Henry County. He's talked to me about that. I think he's gone into Dothan City, and he's got a different perception now. He sees what we're doing in our public schools here in Alabama, or at least here in this area. And so I appreciate him doing that. I mean, he went and looked for himself. And then we do get a lot of support from Paul Lee, Donnie Chastain, Jeff Sorrells. I would say a lot of the local legislators, they're pro-education and they're helping.
And the businesses too, like you mentioned, a lot of the businesses and the universities, Wallace, Community College, Troy, they really do try to come together with you guys. I don't know if everybody who's listening understands that, but there is great partnership between the businesses and the education system locally. Let's talk a little bit about that.
When you look at, just say, for example, Wallace and Troy, dual enrollment's one component. We have children that, again, like our valedictorian that graduates with a 2-year degree the day before he graduates. We have partnerships with Troy and Dothan, Troy main campus, for interns, people who are wanting to go in the education profession. So they have professors and interns in all of our schools. Houston County, same way. We help provide them an opportunity to train with our experienced teachers, and that's the way you build the next generation of teachers to do that. And so, anything, and I've been extremely pleased with Dothan and the Wiregrass. Anything that we have needed, we have ribbon cutting ceremonies for the schools. We have open houses. I've been thoroughly pleased with the support that we're getting from people, within the Chamber of Commerce. We had a ribbon cutting for Academic Dream Room recently at Fane Elementary School. Yes. There wasn't enough room in the room, and so people had to wait out in the hall. There were so many people there. So we're extremely thankful for the community support that we do receive.
I'm going to challenge you on this. Like, you say that, but the community is still giving you the absolute minimum amount of money to fund our children's education. That has always been a problem with me. And I'm not a let's raise taxes and let's spend money kind of guy, but I'm for appropriate investments for our community and appropriate investments for our state and appropriate investments for our nation. So I think a lot of the reason behind people not liking taxes is they see the waste. So like, I pay a tremendous amount of federal taxes. I'm sure y'all do as well, especially. But and then you see it just being frittered away. You're paying people to stay at home. You're paying for all these weird, obscene government programs and studies. And so, yeah, I have a problem with that. But that's never translated, or we've never been able to divide the federal waste from the local, where you said we're giving the absolute minimum to give our children a minimum education, and that's what we're getting. And I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago at the Chamber of Commerce, and I was there with several business executives, and they were complaining not about the job that you were doing, but they were complaining that we are not getting the workforce that we need. We're not getting the quality of the workers that we need. And the problems were with, the public schools, were with the colleges, the local trade schools. And you can't point your finger at one person. You can't point your finger at one system, at one school system, at one government. It's just a big, big problem. And it's a big, hairy mess. I don't know how you fix it.
Well, I think part of that is it's a societal problem, because we've gotten to a point now we're providing so many government benefits that people feel like they're just as well to stay at home as they are to go to work. We talk about a low unemployment rate. It's because the majority of our people aren't wanting to work. They're sitting at home living off the government. And so we've got to change that mindset of our people that we've got to go to work. And that starts, schools have to take part in that. They have to take ownership in part of that, but they're certainly not the cause of it. I think when you look funding wise, the support that we get from local revenues, we do the absolute best we can with that. People want to talk about, or if they have questions about funding, public schools are the most transparent government entity that exists.
Whoa.
Because if you want to, but if you want to see, I mean, you can go onto either one of our websites. Yeah. You can go onto either one of our websites and pull our financial statements and pull our check registers. Yeah. So every invoice that's made, every dollar that we spend, people from the public can go. And we encourage this every year. We have 2 public budget hearings each year in August. Early September. Those are open to the public, and we pass out printed copies of our budgets. We have comment sheets. We give people from the public an opportunity to go home and study it and then come back to the next meeting, make comments. So, if there were additional there is still a voice for the people to have input into how your public dollars are spent. And we offer that opportunity every year, and we offer that level of transparency in our websites with the financial statements that we post every month.
I think what a lot of people look at and determine as waste are mandated. Mm-hmm. Those are things that Central are mandated for us.
That was one of the questions that we had. I posted this on Facebook. Hey, we're going to have these 2 gentlemen on. What do you want me to ask them? And there was a question about the growth in central office staff. But the way you explained it to me a few years ago is like, you got to do it because that's the feds that give you the money. And so you got to have somebody that runs that program.
Well, just to give you a couple examples. One, in years past, we weren't required to have summer school. Now we are. We're required to offer summer school. Well, you got to have somebody to man that. You got to have somebody to organize that. You got to have somebody to, have everything. It doesn't just happen, And so, and that's just one program. You've got the Literacy Act we're required to do certain things. Now, every child, if they're not reading proficient, we've either got to retain them or we can build a portfolio and examine that portfolio and make a determination whether or not they can be promoted or not. Well, with us, with 600 kids, who's going to read 600 portfolios? We've got to have extra people to do that. So for us, about a third of the funds that we received from COVID funds, the extra funds that we received, about a third of that was used to hire additional personnel. Some additional personnel at central office, some additional personnel in the schools. So we hired teachers, we hired people all over. So yeah, we've added a few people at the central office, but guess what? Those positions will expire at the end of this year. And so I don't know what Brandy will share with y'all, but we are at a point now where at the end of this year, this school year, we're facing a drop off of $10 million in funding as a result of the loss of that. So we've got to let go central office people. We've got to rearrange our central office. We've got to rearrange our schools for those extra people and we hired them with the understanding that when these funds run out, your job runs out. So yes, we did add a few people to the central office. We added a few people to each school. So every school got additional personnel, but they were all hired under the understanding that when these funds go out, so does the job. So we've got to find a way to cover and offer the same level of services that are producing these results. We've got to find a way to do that with a loss of $10 million. How are we going to continue the same level of support and with $10 million less resource? That's challenges we have facing us at the end of this year.
Man, I just picture those sleepless nights that you're going to have. God bless you for doing that, though. You are 2 awesome men who are perfect at the helm of this situation.
I hear that a lot about central office, but, I did get our CSFO to kind of pull the percentage of budget that is recommended by the state, 3 to 5% of your budget recommended for central office. The state average is about 8% of your budget. We're at 2.3%. And so
We're at 4. We're at 4.
We have not been top heavy. They're obviously not top heavy. But a lot of the things that are mandated by the state, again, you have to have somebody to manage that, to meet those requirements, or you don't get the funds. So it's difficult when you have so much red tape to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I explained people, that in the same boat, probably not as nearly as drastic, and they ask, like, why do y'all do this way? I mean, the law says we have to do it. Yeah. I remember we had this long discussion about hiring an engineer to do an addition to the DHR building so that they could put an additional laundry machine in there. Well, it sounds overkill, but the law says we got to do it. And talking about building as it relates to schools, y'all have a tremendously expensive process, right?
Yes. And when you have to go through the DCM, it's extra steps when you're putting kids.
Describe what
Department of Construction Management.
Okay. And what do they do?
And so they manage all of the schools as far as their facilities. And so you hire plans. An architect. Yes. And so from the planning phase to the finish phase, they're with you. And it's a lot of red tape and a lot of code.
Mm-hmm.
The school construction now is to a point where we're seeing pretty much $350 a square foot for construction. So that we have to follow International Building Code. There was also a law passed several years ago as a result of tornadoes that hit and tragedies that occurred. So if there's a certain amount of square feet that are built, if it's instructional space, you have to have a safe room, and that's able to withstand an F5 tornado. So when you get to that level of construction, certainly it's going to cost more. So I know one of the questions you had, Brandon, was regarding our 6th grade center. I think that was one of the questions that was posed there as well. And yes, that decision was made as a result of our facility. So before I came on, there was a massive reconstruction of our school system. And so our elementary schools at one time were K-5, and then they were changed to K-6. And so after that change, when you add another grade level, you've also overcrowded. Mm-hmm. And so we had some schools that were overcrowded. We had a couple of schools that were underutilized. So, for example, Girard Intermediate, that campus we were only using 44% of that campus. So looking at the entire district and weighing the options, having discussions with the communities, what's the best option, we determined it was best to pull 6th grade out and form a 6th grade center, separate 6th grade center. That does a couple of things. That keeps us from having to build something new and large for $350 a square foot that we don't have. Number one, that does that. Number two, it frees up room back at our elementary schools that now K-5, so now they have room to grow. So we're looking, adding a couple of classrooms at Slingleff Elementary to bring in children from Fane and restructure that school. And we're looking at adding 4 classrooms at Highland. So we know we've got a lot of growth in the Highlands community. Adding 4 classrooms there after pulling out 6th grade, that will give us the ability to add 175 more children at Highlands that are in grades K through 5. So, there was a little give and take with that. But when you look, the decision was made financially for one. 2, academically, there are some great 6th grade center models. There's a lot of research out there that shows that model works. Auburn City Schools has a 6th grade center, and there's a lot of research, a lot of evidence out there across the country that 6th grade model actually works better than the old middle school model. So that weighed into the decision as well. So it wasn't any one factor that weighed into that. It was a multitude of things that played into that decision to bring those 6th grade students to one facility. Now, we'll still have some 6th graders, if they qualify, will still be able to go to Carver School of Math, Science, and Technology. This year, they're grades 3 through 6. Next year, they'll be grades 4 through 6. So they're still going to house 450 kids. So where they may have 100 kids per grade now, next year we can do, in 3 grades, we can do 150 kids per grade. So that's the give and take, and that's kind of what next year will look like for us. But we're being deliberate with that plan and trying to always keep the best interest of the kids at the forefront.
What about just real quick, just the mental health aspect of the situation you after going through COVID? How is that looking in schools? And you don't have to get too deep into it.
Well, I've only been hospitalized twice. So.
After hearing everything that you've been
Brandy,
going through.
I can't speak for Brandy's mental health, but I know what the rumors are.
They're true. No. How are our kids doing? I mean, how do you think they weathered through COVID?
I think, and Brandy, I don't know how your kids are. We see more mental health issues now than, and this is if you count the 3 years that I did consulting work, this is my 38th year in education, and I see more mental health issues now than I have in my entire career.
What do you think the reason behind that is?
Not just, not just students, staff. The pressures that are there, and COVID, that COVID was a traumatic event for a lot of people. The unknown, if you get it, how are you going to be affected? One person dies, another person's got a cold. So that unknown, I think, when you look at generational studies, there's always some transformational thing that happens, whether it's World War II or whatever. This is going to be the COVID era, is going to create a new generation of people. And so traumatic events like that shape the way people grow up. My father and mother grew up in the Great Depression. And so, that shaped the way they live. And so this generation is going to be shaped by what transpired during COVID. And so I think, I don't think mentally we're as tough as we used to be. My father coming up, going through the wars that they did, you shell shocked, you use those terminologies. And so it's just different. It's just different times. And so as societies progress, we all wanted better for our children, and we've provided more for our children. But in a lot of cases, as we provided more for our children, we've also asked for less responsibility.
Yes.
And so in my career, I have witnessed, and I'm part of that and looking at myself too, each generation to me digresses about 4 years in maturity. So I say that to say this. My father tells me stories of growing up and the things he was doing as a 12-year-old, I was doing as a 16-year-old. And I look a little bit later, the things that children were doing as a 20-year-old, I was doing as a 16-year-old. And so you look at that in college now. You take a first-year student in college now, behaviorally, most children aren't ready to go off to college after they graduate. Behaviorally, they're like we were or I was as a freshman in high school. And so I attribute that to, as a society, we have neglected to give and teach our children responsibility. And that can't be strictly done at school. That has to go take place at home as well.
I think a lot of it is social media. I think there's a ton of division out there. And, let's just face it, that they may be less mature, but they're subjected to a lot more than we were because of social media. And I don't think they're ready to handle that. I think a lot of the bullying that takes place that we dealt with in person, and there probably wasn't as much of it because of that. But, people are willing to they're willing to say some things on social media that they probably wouldn't say in person. And so I think our students are dealing with that a lot. I mean, you can look at Facebook. I mean, we all deal with it, just the negativity that otherwise, you wouldn't see. And you've got some people out there, they're going to be negative about everything.
They're negative people.
There are. And I think that affects our children. And I think they have a tougher time compartmentalizing and dealing with it than, an adult would, most adults.
And you throw that in, the things that they experience in social media, and now we're going to that next generation with artificial intelligence. I fear for our youth moving forward not being able to go on any type of media platform and know what's really real. The artificial intelligence is getting so good where I'm afraid what our future elections will look like. And, are we going to have campaign ads that are doctored and you have people putting words in people's mouth that aren't, but through this software? And I see that coming. And so
I saw an example of that just last night. I was watching a video on Instagram, I believe it was, and it was this congresswoman who's questioning one of those professors from Penn. And they were changing the words that the congresswoman was using. Now, you could not tell that she was not. I have seen the original, and it showed, and it said this is this is using AI to. And anyway, it was making a political point, which was well made. But if you didn't see the original, you wouldn't know that was fake. It was that good. And social media. I remember. I mean, did anybody have an easy adolescence? Did anybody? Like, I didn't. Did you? I was this dorky, scrawny, awkward kid, and but I got to go home and be with my mom and dad and my family at the end of the day. But now you're taking all that stuff home with you on your phone, and I've always thought that to what you were saying, we don't teach our kids to be resilient enough. And I think one of the reasons we don't is because we don't allow them to fail. If you can fail and you realize, okay, I'm going to be okay, you'll mentally not worry about failure and you'll not let that weigh on your psyche. But if you don't learn that lesson, it's hard to become resilient.
And learn to take out the garbage, make your bed,
get
up every morning by yourself, be responsible to keep time so we can leave in the morning, and get to school on time. Like, that's on you. Once you get to be a certain age, you got to give that over to your children. Give them that gift of managing their own selves while they're safe under your presence. And then when they get out into the world, they'll be better for it. Give them the gift of sleep. My son, it drives him crazy, but I will forever, until he graduates and leaves my house, take his phone up at night. It will not be in his bedroom. And we battle that out. And he's like, you mean at 17, I'm going to have to give you my phone? Even more so. Even more so. At 17, you will be giving me your phone every night. And I said, it's not for me. It's for you. One day you'll get it. And of course, he rolls his eyes. And, there's just a couple places where you just literally have to put your foot down. But make your kids take out the garbage. Make them do the dishes. Make them do those things.
And that goes back to what we talked about earlier with Career Tech and opportunities that we have there for training. I know Brandy's been in the construction business. I've got 25 years of education. I have a doctorate. Some of the best education I got was working on a maintenance crew at Adams Motel in Dothan, Alabama as a teenager. And so when I learned trade skills, I don't have to call people at home, but I also learn work ethic, and so you're exactly right. We've got to do a better job of teaching them, not only teaching them skills, but teaching them work ethic.
Yes. Do you have things like that in school? And we won't keep you that long. Do you have
athletics.
Programs like that?
Athletics and band, and even our band, those programs are some of the best things around for us to teach. And then, of course, we have partnerships. We have co-op programs that we can monitor, and our teachers can monitor our students that are going through co-op that may be taking some of these trades. That's a good opportunity to coach and to mentor those folks and try to shape that work ethic. But for us, that's about it. The rest of it really needs to come from home.
I did co-op, and that was so beneficial to just jump right out there, at 17, 18, and, go to work, have to be responsible because they were going to grade me and I was going to get, either yay or nay on that. And also it wasn't called home ec, but it kind of was. What? At Headland High School.
It was
probably
home ec, yes. Mrs. Davis. I still love that woman so much. And I had the opportunity to tell her, thank you so much for pouring into us in such a wonderful way that she did. She taught work ethic. She taught us girls stupid things like nail polish. Make sure, you have to present yourself to society if you want to be successful. And sadly, there are just instant expectations of you, and you have to meet those expectations if you want to be successful. And those were the things she spoke into us.
So I'll do an extra shout out to Yvonne and Ronnie as that promo. So
yes, wonderful people. So helpful.
Well, we could be here forever. and we would probably not solve all the problems.
I do want to say this. Our system's been pretty successful, and I would attribute a lot of that to the parents and their involvement and those type things. But you still have that small percent that they don't want to take responsibility. And when you look at, for instance, our report card, the things where we lost points, that should be the parents' report card because our scores went up. So our teachers are doing their job, and a large majority of our parents are doing their job. But when you won't bring your child to school, or when you allow them to drop out, at an early age, and, you don't put in what's required from a parent. And again, there's different circumstances for everyone. Sometimes there's a need to drop out. But again, a lot of those are parent responsibilities. And so when we look at this report card, this isn't just a school report card. This is a parent report card too. And that's where some of us lost points.
And I'll say this too, just for the viewers that are out there, most of you aren't, education practitioners, and we throw out a lot of education jargon that people in the general public don't understand. And this report card can be overwhelming and probably hard to read through. I share with my board, and I would share this with anybody watching and looking. If you want to look at the report card, the true value and effectiveness of your schools is found in the academic growth component. That's going to measure where that child was day one of school and where were they academically at the end of school. So if you're growing a child there, that tells you what kind of job your school is doing.
Perfect.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being here today. And for our listeners, don't go anywhere because we got part 2 coming up. We're going to be talking with Terry Latham and Senator Donnie Chasteen, and Brandy, I think you're going to be back as well on part 2 of this deep dive into schools where we go into school choice.
That is the Red State Rundown. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.